quality, the visual quality of this is, okay, I was going to wear this hat. You know, see, I'm talking about mental health, so I'll be the mad hatter, ba-boom, tsh. Bad joke, huh? Well, look, I feel I have some license to make bad jokes. No, maybe not. It's also, no, you shouldn't say that, all the policing of how we can talk about such things. Well, as someone who, as I said this morning, and I have been saying a few times now throughout the week, the term mental health has become stigmatized. And now, of course, we're attributing all of the heinous crimes being done by individuals as mental health issues. Or, like in Sydney, we are experiencing things that, we don't normally experience, and that is massacres. Of course, if you are a person of this land, then you understand, then you have experienced massacres, your ancestors did, etc., etc. But in, society of the constructs, right? Yes, we've had terrible, terrible things happen in the last week, like stabbings everywhere, all males, young males and teenage males and, 40-year-olds with schizophrenia, and they've stopped taking their medication, etc. It's mental health that is the issue here. What is happening? And primarily, the first three letters of mental. I'm doing wordplay here, but what is going on with the males of the world and their role models? Look at who is running this world, and this is who young males are supposed to look up to, the males who are the Trumps of this world, the Putins of this world, the Netanyahus of this world, the Andrew Tates and all those the Jordans of this world. I don't know what they want, and they don't quite understand how they're damaging the world. They're all getting older. They don't care. What are people who are almost at death governing the world and the world's countries? They don't care. They're all going to die soon. But actually, no, like Henry Kissinger, they all wait till they're about 100. They still contaminate the world, and they send off young people to war to end up dead or with PTSD, while these people in power die at 100. And the world's young people. Sorry, I haven't gathered my thoughts. All of a sudden, I just pressed live, and I want to talk about mental health. I want to talk about what it takes to have to accomplish and thrive and function, not just function, but thrive. I'm not going to cite anyone else's examples. I can only talk about myself. Those of you who know my background story know that I have, in recent times, been very, very transparent about what I have been suppressing for almost half a century. I was born into privilege, which is, my entire life has been fairly privileged, and therefore I have had opportunities which I have always taken with gratitude and never taken for granted. Sometimes, maybe, when you have a lot of opportunities because you have a cocoon of privilege, you do start to take things for granted, and you start thinking, well, look, it can't be that hard for everybody. Look at, it does. You do get really blinded by your own privilege. And of course, in your own privilege and the opportunities you get, you do work intensely, because you can. When you're not worried about paying the bills, you can work intensely at what you do. Anyway, I was born into privilege, and unfortunately also born into extreme trauma, I guess, which trauma, as I have said, is a fairly new terminology, new word that especially us old people, the Gen Xers, women, I was saying, as I have said before, trauma was a word that we were used to seeing in CSI, followed, that followed blunt force. Trauma was something that happened in triage at the hospital. It wasn't or that soldiers experienced with their, PTSD. Turns out everyone in the world is traumatized, and we all experience trauma in varying degrees. And acknowledging it doesn't mean you're actually healing from it. Acknowledging it is just another badge that we wear to say, hey, back off, I'm traumatized, or I can be this way because I'm traumatized. I have had that thrown in my face quite a few times by people who have not known that I also operate with trauma, but I have chosen not to lead with it. Well, I certainly didn't for the first 50 years of my life. If you're thinking, well, that's great, lady, that's you, blah, 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 blah. This is the channel that my husband and I have started, and this is where we share our stories and our knowledge and our information. So I will talk about myself, and I will talk about what it takes to actually thrive, or not thrive, I don't know. I'm not here to give advice. I'm not giving advice in any way. You know, that's what therapists are for, right? That's what that's what celebrities and therapists are for, right? To give advice. Everyone else, just because I have lived experience, who cares? No one actually listens to each other's trauma. Everyone wants to play trauma Olympics. I have, they do say all of these things once you start telling people things, you do then find out who your real friends are, and I have found out, and they're very, very few, and even then the few friends who stay, it's all too much. They don't really want to talk to you because they resonated with you with me, when I was just, carefree and happy and privileged and accomplishing and this and this and that. I'm still carefree and happy and accomplished and accomplishing, and I still consider myself privileged. I still very much more so because I have clarity now and safety. I have love, and I have that one person who can see me. That's all we ever need, just that one person, which is why I guess therapy is as popular as it is. It's not fixing anyone. Maybe people, yes it does. Maybe people who are independent and don't. I should go back and say that I personally chose not to have medical therapy with the consent of my doctor at the time. And I do support therapy, and I recommend therapy for people who feel they need it. I made a choice, a learned choice, an educated choice, with the consent of medical practitioners, not to do the therapy that we know. That doesn't mean I haven't had therapy. That just means I've chosen not to go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist and be conditioned. God, these words I'm using are harsh. I'm not saying that is what therapy does, but it is still a form of colonization. These are still words that were taken from European, usually white, male scholars, or philosophers who became psychologists. Like, we're all very Freudian in our way of thinking, and the others. It sounds very, very harsh what I'm saying. But anyway, regardless, you do you, you choose for whatever, and I hope it helps you. I do know one person who had therapy for a few weeks and really helped them get back onto track. I do know other people who have tried therapy and it doesn't quite work for them because the therapists are bound by the rigidity of their profession. In that, I mean, and we like to say that healing isn't linear and all that stuff, but healing also requires, what does it require? Look, I don't know. Time? It requires time, and it requires someone to have the strength to listen to you. And therapy to me is, well, this is a person who has been educated and is a medical professional, and they then sit there and tell, and are they really objective? How can anyone be objective? I don't know. These are all my things. Whatever works for you. I am not at all condemning therapy. Please do you, but I do know, and I did know, that it did not sit well with me, because I have also seen far too many people who use now my therapist as one would say, well, I believe in God. So everyone has now turned to therapy as the new crutch from along with religion. So and I've seen far too many people who are in therapy who I know are there simply because they want to be listened to and heard, and have an excuse to take off a mask because, well, they pay for this, right? Far too many therapists in this world. What does that say? That should say something else. What's wrong with all of us? Instead, we encourage all of this. Go see a therapist. Why? Why can't somebody have the strength to actually sit there and ask someone, what is wrong with you? Tell me. I have done that simply because it's avoidance. A lot of people also choose avoidance as their therapy, and they go and have the best advice for other people who need therapy. And so now we're all playing trauma Olympics, or playing therapist with each other, each one of us advising the other how to be when we're suppressing our own turmoil. So many of us can see this about ourselves, how we help other people simply as a way of denying ourselves the help we need from our own selves. Why can't we give the therapy to ourselves that we freely offer to others or accept from paid strangers? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, you do you. This is it for me. But that doesn't mean I don't believe in therapy as healing. Therapy means finding, what does therapy mean literally? Look, I don't have my laptop here. Therapy for me was all of this. I finally fell apart. Well, I can't say I fell apart. I describe it as the bones of my brain broke, or the cage that I put my brain in. Well, that fell apart. And I was given a reset. I had a breakdown in 2022 after 50 years of suppressing trauma, and I was 51 at that time, and 45 years of being suicidal. I was 6 when I was in a situation where I witnessed my mother being violently battered, being jumped on, being kicked, etc. And she was pregnant, heavily pregnant with my younger sibling. And I was screaming. We were in another country because we were very privileged, so we were traveling all around the world and living in places around the world. And I was screaming, and there were other people there, but they chose not to interfere, because back in the day, I guess, when a husband is taking out his frustration with the world, regardless of how successful and accomplished he is, if someone is too weak to not be able to regulate their own emotions, and this is a new thing too, emotional regulation it's a fancy new term that I love, and it describes it. I love all the terms of the day, red flags and emotional regulation. Well, if people don't have the strength to do that, well, then they become tyrannical. The ego, wants to vent rage that they've had to suppress from wearing masks, but they will take it out. And I have done that. I can't deny that I haven't done that. I have been, I will be angry with people who anyway. I swallowed my scream as I was screaming because he warned my mother that if I didn't stop screaming, he would kill me. And so she very gently, while she was being battered, her head was being stomped on. My mother gently said to me, "Beta," and in Hindi said to me, "Darling, please be quiet, don't scream." And so I had to swallow my scream, and I watched my mother getting battered, and then as she lay unconscious, he left and he yelled at her to get out of his sight, and she couldn't move, so I had to drag my mother to safety. And I don't remember much after that, because that is when my PTSD now set in, the trauma of that. I swallowed my scream, and that scream has been reverberating between my skull and my brain for that long, until I felt safe enough to actually break, and that happened in 2022. But prior to that, I had a miracle. I have a miracle. I believe in miracles because I was given the gift of a best friend who was strong, who is strong, who was strong enough to listen to me and be the friend I needed. I'm not saying that there haven't been other people who have been there for me, but they've been there for me when it's just been superficial stuff. They haven't been there for me when I've actually needed to share something about me that needs to be vented, but I had put that cage on me at 6 and no one was going to find out anything about me. And at 18, I reiterated that no one who has ever known me throughout my life has realized that I have been suicidal at every moment they have met me. There has never been a day when I haven't. Thank you. There is someone else who also knows how it feels, and they have said no longer will we remain silent and protect our abusers. And I admire Gen Z for doing this, for refusing to stay silent about the shit that they have had to endure when being born into, born with, and being subjected to. I, at least being a Gen Xer, have had moments where it's just been, my accomplishments, my forays into my artistic endeavors have helped me thrive and accomplish and suppress my trauma. Whew. You lose a lot of people when you say all of this. I certainly have. I don't really blame my friends because so many of them, all of them were used to me being a certain way. So all of them have said to me, we thought you were so strong. And to that I say, but I'm stronger than you realize because I managed to be all of that and not tell you what it is I was not telling you. My entire life, or the entire time they've known me, I have walked on runways after saving myself from an attempt. I have gone on to radio after another. I have been in excruciating pain, that pain of that scream reverberating between my skull and my brain, tenderizing it. That scream feels like shards of glass and barbed wire pressing into the tenderness of my brain, and my brain fries. It's like the whole electricity grid just goes off. Not anymore. But that is a recent thing. That is a recent thing. I also should say that I have said that I chose to forego therapy. I also chose to forego medication, and that's not because I'm not pro-medicine. I am very much pro-medicine, but I understand that medicine is an aid. It is not by which we exist with. It is an aid, and that's why it works well with me if I have antibiotics. The last time I had antibiotics was last year after surgery. I had emergency surgery, which I didn't tell people about, but there you go. Why do we hide these things? I had emergency surgery, was in hospital for 1 week, and I got to experience morphine, like oxycodone, because apparently I was screaming in the middle of the night and saying, just let me go, and I had to talk to one of the nurses that I am actually experiencing. I am in recovery from finally saying the words that I have never been able to say, but finally, in the arms of my gift, I was able to fall apart, or not fall apart. I was able to actually just let go of this cage in my brain. And I said the words, I need help. I still can't believe I said those words. I remember the exact date. This happened to me. It's happened to me in Fiji. Quite poetic. No one knew, of course, because, people make their own judgments anyway. And wouldn't you know, even though we get encouraged to talk about these things, etc., well, gosh, I've lost over 1,000 followers, not just because of what I'm saying, of course, in terms of my own mental state, etc., which My mental state right now, if you want to know, is, I have clarity. I have such beautiful clarity. Imagine a wonderful clear ocean or a wonderful clear, crystal clear creek that flows out into a river and is getting the source is a wonderful waterfall. That's how my mind feels. And I love thinking within this mind. Thinking is such a beautiful thing. And however way you choose to think, I choose to see myself floating in a crystal clear lagoon. I am an island woman after all. I still need to have the beauty of an island in my visuals, in my mental, in my meditations. I love thinking. It's so wonderful to think with clarity and not out of knowing that you need to be constantly running away from yourself, because that is how all of us who are suppressing trauma are. We're always feeling like we're imposters. We're always running away from our present self. We're dwelling on the past or running from the past and always, always worried because we're constantly putting ourselves in the future. None of us can be in the present moment because it is too painful to be in the present, because you then have to come face to face with what it is you are running away from that is pushing you into the future. No wonder none of us feel secure in ourselves. No wonder we all feel like imposters. I don't feel like an imposter anymore. I have dove straight into that tar pool of misery that is, everything for me comes down to some form of liquid. Of course, we come from liquid. We are incubate. We grow in liquid inside our mother's wombs, in the uterus. We come out in a gush of liquid. We are primarily water. I would see the depression I have been under for my entire life as an ocean I was holding up. And back when I was young, I was strong and I was holding it up with my hands like in superhero pose, and how dare you, you will not. But sometimes it would crash heavily on me. And then you'd pick yourself up, dry yourself off, and go back to it. I guess after a while it just all gets too much, and then that weight just got too much, and then I was on like this, and then I'm visualizing this, of course, and then lying on the seabed of my ocean of depression, holding up that ocean with one finger. So when I did finally fall apart, if you want to use that term, okay, fine, I fell apart. All right? Whatever. I didn't. I actually felt together enough to break. A friend had said that. A friend said that to me. A friend who was going through their own trauma and unfortunately is in denial about it, and then did power plays with me. I don't know. But I miss that friend. Or what we had before. But we all play these trauma games with each other. Trauma bingo, trauma Olympics, trauma poker. So when I finally did feel safe enough to, it was basically, I just said, okay, drown me. And you know what? You can surprise yourself. You can absolutely surprise yourself. I did. I continue to. The healing process is painful, and that's why so many people don't want to do it. They wallow in the acknowledging trauma and think that is enough, but that is never going to be enough. That is merely the start. It's like saying that a fashion parade is the culmination of the creative process, and no, that's actually now. Okay, now we're talking. If you got to that point, let's see now what you can do with that. What's the point of having pretty clothes if that's not flying off the shelves, right? I suppose I could say that for everything. Like we ask after having launched all our creative endeavors that we absolutely believe in, because we believe in ourselves. You've got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. This is a different world, and I am a Generation X dinosaur in that I still think that merit plays a part, and I don't think so. Because the hustlers have the floor, and that's fine. That's fine. Because with diversity and this diversity and inclusivity, whatever that is, who is including us? Who kept us out in the first place? And who is determining that this is their right to include us in the first place? Why do we still place so much value on constructs? Great, let them have their constructs. Why are we all kowtowing to that? I love the Eurostream constructs. I live in them. I walk boldly through them. Unfortunately, that also makes me a bit of an outlier, because I have never looked at these constructs and gone, oh, please pick me, or I don't look at these constructs and see walls. I don't see walls, and that is my privilege as a multicultural person, as a brown woman, an Indo-Fijian woman. That is my privilege in the world, that I do not see the walls, and yet I don't exploit that. Even though I have at times had full carte blanche to go through, just walk through. I don't see the walls, I can walk through, because that makes me, the way I speak, the way I am, my mannerisms, my knowledge, makes me welcome at times in these spaces that others are, and I look at them and go, oh, okay, so I'm just a token brown person here. Okay, well, if that's what I've been given, I am going to then represent my people. I am not an Oreo, brown or black on the outside and white on the inside. I'm brown, completely. And even in these Euro spaces, I am a brown woman. But I have never exploited that ability of mine to not see the walls, and that is the result of growing up privileged, of growing up living in other countries. Sure, I grew up with extreme trauma, but I also grew up with privilege, and that is why I chose to lead with privilege, because that's so terribly greedy to have all that privilege and the opportunities that privilege gives you. And I'm not just talking about financial privilege. I'm not just talking about global, experience privilege. I'm also talking about looks privilege, education privilege, all the privileges. And looks privilege, yes, for a woman, looks privilege. Unfortunately, when you are rewarded for looks privilege younger, and you don't quite have a handle on yourself, because who actually knows who they are until they're about 40? And the brain literally doesn't stop growing until 25. And here we are destroying it with all sorts of things, alcohol and drugs and suppression of trauma, denial, and oblivion is what we're looking for at the ripe time of when that brain needs absolute clarity. This is why parents are supposed to have children, or this is why parents exist. People are supposed to have children once they know who they are, but no, people have children to find out who they are. I don't think it's supposed to work that way. I think we're supposed to create new human beings already knowing who we are, so that we can imbue them with the right steps to go and be who they are, individual human beings. But what has the world done? So many people rely on what they create, and they think they own them, and they want these children to go and be what they couldn't be. So they lead vicarious lives, or take it out on the very children that they brought into the world, who had no say in being in this world. But anyway, thank goodness for my beloved mother, because this is where the fragmentation has come into my brain. And I recognize now, thanks to Dr. Instagram, but I'm very grateful for that, because the accounts I follow on Instagram are very, I follow very few accounts on Instagram, and the accounts I do follow are of people who interest me, or people who have content that interests me, because even people who don't have content that interests me are people who interest me. So I may not follow accounts, but I like the person I interact with, maybe. But I follow lots of news accounts and science accounts and spiritual accounts, and now I'm following or have been finding information from people who freely share information about ADD and ADHD. And as a journalist, I am primed to connect dots, to see patterns. Well, I don't know if as a journalist, but as someone who has grown up with trauma, I have a brain that can see things. Because when you're traumatized in childhood, you are on eggshells and you have to constantly watch out for the triggers. So you learn to read people, so you can't be lied to if you have been living with trauma since birth. You can't be lied to. And I think that not everybody who has had trauma since birth can have this sight. I think it does require the particular set of circumstances I had, and that was being born to a God. My mother is one of my gods. My God. She is my God. The other is the external manifestations of me. That is what divinity is. That is what God is. An externalization of the divinity within. I have chosen not to be religious nor believe in God, but I haven't really said that from an atheist point of view. I think more agnostic, because I do understand that something exists, that spirituality exists, and now, it is only now, and I'm fresh saying this to in public ways, that I do believe in God. I do. Not in the constructs that are currently manipulating and controlling the world. I believe in humans. We created the concept of God because we understood there was something else bigger than us. We didn't quite understand what it was, but that we felt ages ago, way before we had words to describe what it is we're feeling. But we understood there was something greater than us. And then it has trickled down through the generations, and that archaic way of thinking, because it, was fractured. So it was either science or God. Anyway, I do digress, but as I said in the Sandhya Show, it's a free flow. I have that particular set of circumstances that I was born into absolute privilege and didn't have to worry about certain things like, how you're going to pay the bills, etc., or poverty. And then having one parent who is just absolute purity of love and divinity, and one parent who is a channel for demonic rage, whilst also being someone I would look at and go, why, Dad? You're so brilliant. You're so fantastic, magnificent, spectacular, gorgeous, My parents together were beautiful. But I understand something about my father. My father was dynamic. My father was a go-getter. He was going to, stomp all over the naysayers. Don't forget, he was an Indo-Fijian man, in the 60s and 70s, traipsing all over Europe, proving a point here. I get it. I get what he had to, what he had to swallow. I get the racism he must have faced and what it must have been like for him, trying to accomplish something because he knew he had something in him, and he did. He had the merit. He had the goods. My father was brilliant. So was my mother. But my mother, she just got dazzled by him, I guess, and he saw her, and she was an it girl of her times, and I guess but if I was my mother's friend then, and I don't know how this would have happened, but let's just say my essence, my energy was in a vessel that was her friend, or if I could go back in time, but that would then mean I would not exist. Oh well. If I could go back in time, I would say to her, no, get away from him. Get away from him. He is not what you think he is. Yes, sure, he is a man of the people, but so many men of the people, women of the people, and I come from a country rife with that contamination. The people of the people, all hiding behind Jesus. Poor Jesus. No wonder he's not coming back, I'm going to tell you. It's like, not for these people. I protect the abuser who tried to kill me. My best friend, she's still walking around, and everybody has taken her side again. They did it to me back 25 years ago when I got ostracized because I withdrew from society after I just couldn't handle all of this shit. Everyone's so contaminated and corrupt, and they're all still alcoholics, these vipers. Oh gosh, I come from a small place, but big personalities, big egos, huge. Big fat fish now in a very small pond, and the fat fish don't want to leave this pond, and they flop their, unhealthy fins and drown the guppies and the small fish who are the young people who are trying to make something of themselves in that country full of potential. Fiji is dripping with creativity and administrative brilliance. I'm not so sure if they are critical thinkers there. So many smart, intelligent people are still bound, are still so confined by the rigidity of what they think they know. Everyone is in their comfort zones and they're sticking there. Harsh, yes, I know. As I said, I have a particular set of circumstances that have given me the ability to see things. And that was the extreme privilege and extreme trauma, extreme purity of love and extreme demonic rage. And for that, it's like, okay. My mother never cried in front of me, even though I saw her strapping sanitary pads to her thighs to stop the bleeding from her pores because her bones were broken inside. But they had to go to a super society cocktail party. So my mother and strapped sanitary pads. And these are the things I saw, but she wouldn't let me see them. She never cried in front of me. She never, ever took out her trauma on me. And she and I both hid our trauma from each other, even though we were always there for each other. But never told each other anything. People of few words to each other, bound by DNA and shared trauma. How my mother lived with that trauma in her mind, I do not know. Sushil is a superhero. My first superhero, those of you who know us, who know me, know that I like superheroes. Wonder Woman is, a favorite character of mine. Wonder Woman was my second favorite superhero. My first is my mother. And no, I have never wanted to be Wonder Woman. I just wanted someone like Wonder Woman to come and just come on. Because I was surrounded by friends. My mother too. My mother helped everybody. Hello, we were a politician's family. My mother had to go and give, would open things of women in need shelters. And I'm like, wow, and yet no one helped my mother. No one helps women like us. Even these professional feminists in Fiji. Sorry, you hypocrites. And I have had a lot of dealings with them. I have just published an episode of our podcast, Radio Fly, where I talk very candidly about these things. More so because Dwayne and I were talking, and it's easier to talk this way, knowing that people aren't going to be looking at you, they're just listening to you. What does it feel like to be suicidal? Look, I'm getting to that. What does it feel like to be suicidal? What does it feel like to have attempted and then you have to stop yourself? Because this is the war that goes on in our heads, or certainly in my head. I can't speak for anyone else. People who are suicidal don't want to die. Let's get that one straight. They don't want to die. It's just that living is really difficult under the pressure of that thing that happens to brains. Our brains are tender, living organisms. Brains are incredible, and look at how we destroy them. Why are we so hell-bent on our own destruction? If not through war, then self-war. And self-war could just be, hey, you're a party person. Oh my God, party, drinking, let's get drunk. Why? Why are you so in need of oblivion? Now, that is one thing I saved myself from as a young person. Yes, I had fun. Despite all the trauma, let me do share this with you, that I have got many great memories of my childhood and teenhood and 20s, etc., my entire life. I refuse to have gone through life like, oh, misery guts. And I refused to have oblivion. So people may remember me, particularly in Fiji, as, oh yeah, she was a party person as well. Yeah, nah, I was, but I wasn't drunk. I was watching all of you chase oblivion. For what reason, I don't know, but I think I do. Now that they're still chasing oblivion in their 50s and 60s. Like, what the hell? God, and these are the role models for young people. Sweet. Good on you, love. Show these young people how to be bitter and drunk, how to hate everybody, but oh, go to church and drop Jesus everywhere you can. And if you want, and you can't do this because that one person has got Jesus number plates in Fiji now. Ooh, driving around, putting exhaust on the number plates of a name she hides behind. While also blocking me. Why don't these people ever want to talk? When you ask them, so why did you try and kill me? And why did you then have this entire smear campaign for 25 years and then pretend to be my friend for 30 years? And, oh, look, but I assure you that it is nothing that has happened to me that causes me any grief. I just think, wow, I can't trust anyone. So I don't really trust anyone, even though I have full faith in people. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I give myself the benefit of the doubt, which is why I have me inside me saying, mate, you don't want to die. For starters, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to experience. Can we get over that? The other side of me is like, I am screaming. I am still a 6-year-old child. So the healing process for me has been growing into my present day self. And the battle is then staying in my present day self, that regardless of what is around me that will trigger me into, I am still in my present day self, looking forward to the future, but not running away from myself by running into the future. Looking back at my past by not suppressing it, by going, okay, I get it. I get why I'm the way I am, but I can, change that because that was trauma response behavior. Or we all start to exhibit narcissistic traits, even the traumatized ones. And it is the people who are traumatized, who are narcissists. And these are the people whose egos have been traumatized. And the more your ego has been traumatized, the more you want to externalize that trauma. And sometimes ego trauma is nothing more than a rejection from somebody who you wanted to have sex with. And all of a sudden, guys like this, they hate all women. And women like that, for some reason, they also start to hate women. They not only become misandrists, they become misogynists. And I talk a lot about that, how women, there are misogynists hiding inside women's bodies, and I am talking about born women, cis women. Women hate each other, and this is a patriarchal response. But I think it's also a response of a weak mind. Weak minds will always go for the easy option. And it's easier to hate than it is to actually love. It is easier to want to sabotage than actually support others. People don't really want to support others, do they? Especially people with ego. There's so much in this world that didn't have to be the way it is. There's so much that is going on now that can be stopped simply by the people who are perpetuating it, saying, I'm angry, help me, I don't want to take it out on anyone else, but they don't do that. Why I know that is because those of us who internalize it take it out on ourselves. We punish ourselves, and that is why when it is extreme, we also then say, well, what's the point of living? Because there's a lot to live for, but if you're going to live in it with absolute pain, what's the point? What's the point? I have many, many points, and I have always had many, many points, and my primary point was my mother. If she could live for me, if she lived through all the trauma of having her children stolen from her. I have shared that story. During the coups, I was not allowed to, I was not able to go home. I know I have shared this story. I don't want to repeat these things, but if my mother stayed strong enough, and no one knew, everyone knew there was something, she was the kindest, saddest woman they all saw. Everyone likes to talk about how wonderful my mother is. She saved people from suicide attempts. And my mother would never, because her purpose was me. After my mother died, and she only died when she finally knew that she could, I was my mother's carer for the last few years of her life. She had cancers, but interesting cancers which didn't actually affect the rest of her body. Her doctors were amazed at the fact that she has tumors, ovarian cancer, too. Because her biggest regrets ever were bringing my brother and me into the world, and not because of us, but because of her. How could she? Because she saw me being battered, her beautiful daughter, her Kaleja, she called me, being battered, having my spine fractured in front of her. She couldn't protect me except to throw herself so that he would drop. The last thing I heard, the first time I got my battering, the last thing I heard was a clang. And I do remember it was the meat chopper. And we were in the kitchen because it was easier to get beaten up in the kitchen. We had a big kitchen, we had a big house. That house still exists. The house is still there on Buckenbar Road. I don't know what to say about my father. I feel guilty for ruining the fact that, yes, he had a lot of good points because he was a man of the people, and everyone outside of our home, even people who were part, of our family, people would, he's such a wonderful man, so congenial, so social, so generous. Sure, we got whatever we wanted, except safety. And before you ask, well, why didn't your mother try to? Well, she did, many times. And the police actually helped my father find us, because why wouldn't they believe him? That they just had a fight and my mother ran away with the children. Why wouldn't they believe him? He was a man of the people in a leadership role. And I assure you that there are many people in these roles of leadership and authority. I mean, this woman who tried to kill me, simply because I confronted her about the lies she was telling about other people and me. She was my best friend. She is the face of a charitable organization. Okay. Sure. Why don't people question then? Why is she such an alcoholic? Everyone knows it. People of these... Anyway. My father, right? Beautiful. And look, there were many, many periods of fun times, and when he was not raging, when things were smooth, wow, great time. I saw the love and passion between them. I know my parents were really passionate. I wasn't born with trauma, unlike my sibling, who, now that I have actually opened up, because at my mother's funeral, my sibling said that I was strong but shallow, until, of course, I broke. And then now he's cut me off, because no one actually wants to hear anybody else's trauma in case their trauma is worse. So it's like, oh, well, I don't really want to dwell on your trauma because I've got to, wallow in my own. So people don't want to listen to anybody else's trauma. And this is what I also think about therapists, professional therapists. Are you trauma-free? Are you treating people without any, do you have trauma? Has that trauma made you feel empathy, or do you have some sort of God power in your hands? I don't know. I'm not saying anything against therapy. Please know that I am pro all of these things. Pro medicine, pro therapy. What you do, what suits you, but I hope you're doing it knowing what you're doing and not trying to mask the truth from your own self, and then having just 1 hour to yourself where it's all about you. It's the you show. Look, it's the Sandhya Show right here. But it is difficult to be this visible, especially if you're at this age, or at any age really. People will actually use you as laughing fodder. I am being laughed at in the country of my birth by all these society people, a society I was once a part of, not because I was wanting to be, but because, well, and also I had surpassed the society. When I went back into Fiji, it's like, oh, go on, they've got little cliquey societies all over the place. Great. I mean, I'm a part of that society. I grew up in that society. So I've never ever wanted to be in that society. I've always been an outlier for the way I think, and that was fine with me, because it's always good to be an outlier. Then they let you do what you want to do, but because they're also quite amused by you or what you do, then they, And also, who wants to be bound? And who wants to belong to any club these people belong to? No thanks. However, I do love the society I grew up in. There have been lots and lots of great times, and particularly in the 90s. And stay tuned for that. A show talking about what it was like back then is coming up. and talk about not just my life, but life in general in Fiji and the world, in Australia and in Asia in the late 80s and in the 90s, and how it was a very progressive time. So, anyway. Oh, gosh, who would believe my mother? I do remember one of the last times she tried to run with us, and we were hiding out in a place that we didn't, I'm sure she knew, she thought that he would never find us because, well, but they found us, he found us. They, police, I guess, I don't know. And he promised to change, and at first the promises were, they'd last months, and then a month, and then a week, and then as soon as we got in the car, we knew what was going to happen to my mother as soon as she got out of the car. Anyway, so I endured regular beatings that would leave me or render me unconscious for weeks, but people wouldn't ask because we were privileged, so I would just say, oh, I went to India with my father. Oh, I just, blah, blah, blah. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And everyone believed. Now my friends, of course, say to me, oh, they got asked by teachers, is Sandhya okay? And they'd be like, yeah, she's fine, but she stands on top of a roof looking down right on the edge. I don't know, she's fine. Yeah, she's got some weird behavior and some weird bruises, and oh gosh, she's so out there, she's so dramatic. I would do these things because between the ages of 12 and almost 16 is when I was shipped off to boarding school. Between the ages of 12 and almost 16, I got beaten regularly because he was in a very, very stressful time politically, etc., etc. He was, gosh, my father was amazing. I know. I'm not protecting the asshole, okay? He was too weak to do something about this, to internalize his trauma. He took it out on my mother, and then he took it out on me. He took it out somewhat on his first wife's kids, but they did not, and neither did my sibling. He, my brother, did not experience what my mother and I did. The violence my mother and I experienced makes me wonder what violence my father experienced. He must have experienced something very, very heinous. But anyway, no one asks, no one cares. My friends just thought I was being overly dramatic because this is what I would do in order to hide the beatings, the bruises, and you'd be very careful so our faces wouldn't be touched, and very rarely our arms, but definitely our backs. He fractured my spine. I was 12, and other bones, etc. So I would then plan to, I would ask my mother to drive me to my school, Suva Grammar School, represent, in weekends or after hours, because I forgot something, I forgot something somewhere, and I left something in the girls' lunch area or something. And I would go and just, when it was empty, go and see, okay, if I fall this way over here, I can land in such a way that if I landed hard enough on these steps with sharp edges and stuff, I would then land well enough to then account for the bruises on my legs and the broken bones, etc. And the sick bay was right there. So I'm like, okay, plan this. Okay, tomorrow, do that. And mind you, my mother would say, Beta, you can barely walk. That's all right, Mom, we can't go to hospital, can we? So, yes. So inside the mind of a suicidal person, what happens? So I'm going to just move on and talk about, because I don't really want to be here for too much longer. I do have some other work to do, and we have got a show dropping this evening, this slideshow, which is an old-fashioned travel show. And we're starting out with our adventures out back with photos, just with photos. All photos. At times when I have, because for most of my life, what people don't realize is that the suicidal ideation is a constant thrum in the back of your mind. So you can be talking, you can be socializing, you can be accomplishing publicly. As I said, I have been on runways, I've been on television, reading the news, I've been on radio, sharing my information. I have been giving interviews, I've been modeling, editorials, I've been head of departments, etc., and I have been suicidal because we're highly functioning. It's and we choose not to take it out on others, and also, but avoidance does play a huge part. So you accomplish to avoid. And I see a lot of people, particularly the activists now, all using advocacy and activism as avoidance. Even the good people, even the people who think they're good. A lot of people hide under that too, the shield of good, because look at what they do. Look at the books they write. Look at the organizations, look at the events they organize. Look at the things they do. So yes, I have, so I'll talk about back in my late 20s when my ex-best friend, who had already started betraying me years earlier, and which when I did find out came as a huge, huge betrayal. Because I also know her secrets, because that's what friends are, right? However, I am a vault. I protect my abusers' secrets. Even the ones who sabotage, like that MC Jesus, another one from Fiji. Gosh, trying to contaminate the society in Sydney by buying their way into it, by, obtaining public relations people. Mate, you've got to have merit, but then again, you got so far based on your bullshit and your hustle and you're dropping psalms left, right, and center. Oh God, what a hateful person. Hates everyone in Fiji, hates his boyfriend. Oh my God. The boyfriend, by the way, now I'm just some salacious gossip for those people who may know what I'm talking about. The boyfriend is actually the one with all the talent. But the boyfriend is always going to be suppressed because of that talent. But anyway, I am talking about some things here about these people who sabotage. I don't know why they do, but they do. I don't know why they do these things. Why do they have to? Well, because they need to scratch their itch, huh? And they're not strong enough to actually internalize that itch. They have to take it out on others. It's crazy. But anyway, back then, so after that happened to me, that triggered the trauma from my younger years, because from the age of 18, when I went back to Fiji, I zipped it all away. I'm like, no way, no fucking way is anyone ever going to know that I have been dealing with a lot of shit. And in trauma therapy, which is in another playlist, I am way more open about everything I went through. But, it doesn't matter what you go through. I mean, blah. No one cares unless you're a celebrity. And then, oh, look, poor Britney. But if you're just an average person who has had their spine fractured and been raped twice when they were 13, and, by prominent members of society, of the society you grew up in, and, you've been assaulted before that, and then you were ripped away from your mother and unable to see your friends, family, and home, and your mother for 2 and a bit years, and your homeland, your beloved country gets ripped apart by political egos and coups happen, and then after that, because you can't go home, but you've got to keep up front, but you don't want to keep going with your friends, so instead you sleep on the street because your pride and your shame at being a daughter of a senator at a prestigious girls' boarding school, and you're broken and you don't want to ask for help, and you're only 16 and 17. So you sleep on the streets and then get attacked by junkies. But nobody wants to hear that, do they? They just want to hear about what happens to celebrities and the trauma that celebrities go through. And yeah, fuck it, I don't want no thanks. That's what the other thing is. I never wanted sympathy, and I never ever wanted. But as we talk about, because Dwayne asked me a very valid question on our podcast episode about this. I don't think I'll tell you. I think I'd like you to listen to it. It's just an hour. A very valid question about something. And I guess when you're never given that opportunity, you don't know. You don't know how to answer it. But please do listen at your own leisure, at your leisure. Anyway, I was triggered and I was 27 at that time. But from 18, I had made a promise. I would never lead with my trauma. No one is to know. I will just give the experiences of my privilege, the opportunities that I will then get from that privilege that I have, I will take. But I didn't wait. Back in those days, well, you could do bold things like say, I'm here, I've got something really good for you, and that's me. Try me. So I did that. I walked straight into the radio station. And back in those days when everything was about merit, back when the radio station I worked for, I still have allegiance towards, and I do explain something about that in the podcast episode as well, about the differences in the radio stations, because there are two radio stations and there's huge differences between them. But when I walked into the radio station, I still have allegiance to, maybe, never, I don't know, because they were the government's radio station. And in the last 2 decades, that hasn't been a good thing, unfortunately. So I got triggered in my late 20s after suppressing some pretty crazy things up till 18, and then just an upwards trajectory. I did not have time to wallow in misery. I did not have time to address what I was suppressing. I needed to be as visible as possible, to use that as my invisibility cloak. So yes, I hid visibly. So, I am just, I'm talking about now the attempt I made, whatever, because I got triggered and then I, blah, blah, blah. But then as I shared before, I thought of the headlines. And unfortunately, the reason why I thought of the headlines is because I thought of my mother. I didn't want my mother finding out certain things. I think I do share this in the podcast episode. When people who are actually certain and or people are suicidal, they become very clear. So beware. If you do know people who you know are suicidal around you, the signs are when they become very calm and clear and they know what they're going to do. Well, I don't know if I was calm or clear. I was certainly alone at that time. I had withdrawn from society because of my best friend, ex-best friend, whatever, who then, after trying to kill me, she then started her smear campaign against me. And because she knew that I was not someone who liked to engage in such public commotions or whatever, I would not retaliate in any way, nor speak in any way. And I thought my friends would actually go out of their way to say, hey, we understand, we're with you. But no, they didn't do that. They forced me to make a decision, and that was to push people away before I could be hurt. And this is what traumatized people do, because we've been hurt so much. We push people away before we can be hurt. We preempt it. Or we create the hurt. We create conflict so that we can be angry and therefore not grieving. I found out very much who my friends were back then. I knew that not to, So I was triggered and I was alone very badly, and I made some stupid decisions. Yes, I'm not going to deny the stupidity I went through, but the thing is about when you fuck up, you're supposed to learn from your fuck ups. You're not supposed to fuck up over and over again and go, oh, whoops, trauma. Or sorry. When you do make mistakes, and I made some things, I went against my principles, and I have talked about this misogyny of women, right? And I said in this podcast episode that women do betray each other, and I have not been, I'm not exempt from that. I have betrayed other women, but I do betray other women when I feel and I sense and I know. And as I said earlier, people who have been traumatized since birth know. We have sight, we can feel. I know the moment I have been betrayed. And my feelings about people then change. I may be all the same on the surface, but inside it's like, I know. I feel. If you're going to ask, well, why didn't you feel something was wrong with your best friend? Oh, I knew, and I felt, and there was only one other person who knew that, and that's how I came to know about how badly she had betrayed me for years before anything had gone wrong. Oh, and I talk about that in depth. Anyway, what was I saying? So, about suicide, right? It's really hard to heal completely and properly when you are not in a safe frame of mind. Cost of living takes that safe frame of mind away. When you have to stay focused on earning money to pay bills, because as full-time creatives, both of us, the thing is with full-time creatives, you've got to have someone who isn't. You've got to have someone who believes in your ability, but then again, there are also people who, partnerships, that they start like, well, why aren't you, I'm like, whatever. But if you do have the safety zone of having someone who believes in you and your vision, then you can achieve a lot. And then once you start achieving, it just, what's the term I'm looking for? It's just never ending. You're on that ride, you're on that conveyor belt, and you keep achieving, and you keep suppressing, and you keep lying to yourself. I, in the last 2 decades, when I had my ex relationship, God, I don't even know how to talk sometimes. No one knew. No one knew. And that's fine. No one wanted to know. Because I'm not saying I haven't leaked bad trauma response behavior. At times I would become very cold in some ways, because even though I chose not to be thick-skinned, because who wants to be thick-skinned and unfeeling? Thank you very much. I want to feel everything. So I chose to then build my core, make my core steel, so I am unbreakable, but I am thin-skinned. I feel, I will cry. I will cry with joy. I will cry with grief. I will cry looking at all the atrocities of the world. I cannot read the news without emotion. I am a human being. But I am a human being with a core of steel, and that is what we are meant to be. Resilient, they call us. We're not meant to be resilient. We're just meant to be human beings. I'm going all over the place, I know. My apologies. So when I say I have betrayed other women, yes, I have in the past. I have. I can't keep myself exempt from that. In my defense, I have seen what they've done to me, and I let them redeem themselves, and they still didn't, because so many people wish to have power plays over people like me. Maybe narcissists can really smell out someone who has a bit of a fawn response, and out of all the responses, there's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. My mother, the fawn is the people pleaser. My mother wasn't a people pleaser. It's just that the fawn under trauma needs to appease the abuser. I'm not necessarily a fawn response person, but definitely fight or flight. And in healing is where you freeze. This is why so many people don't want to heal. It is frighteningly hard. It is really, really hard. And if you do it naked-minded, oh my gosh, I recommend it, and I'll let you know how I go. But you do what you do. But if you have the luxury, and it is a luxury to be able to heal naked-minded, because people have to work, people have to bring up children, people have to exist in a society that demands you do all of these things, especially if you're a woman. Then you've got to do all of it, and you've got to swallow your trauma. But if you're going to acknowledge trauma, get onto medication, get back to it. That's what we have to do. Come on, money, 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 let's make it. I had the luxury of having my best friend, who happens to be my husband. I couldn't work. I couldn't work at all when I broke down in 2022 from then onwards. But I had to function like I was a normal person, because people do not want to see people like me broken. And if they do, they just want to stomp all over people like me. And then there are people who just hate transparency, people who hate truthful people. But anyway, I am talking about what goes on in the mind of someone who is suicidal. Well, okay, here we go. So that time, right back in the late 90s, I thought of the headlines. I thought, damn, how are they going to get the headlines right? What are they going to say? And my mother is going to see it. And that's what actually stopped me. And then I got ready to go to work. Went to work and thought about, okay, well, don't worry. But other times I have thought about it. What goes on in my mind is, well, what am I going to wear? Should I wear a hat? I'll just keep the hat on. Should I wear a hat? Does this go with my outfit that I'm going to wear when it's going to be the final moments of my life, blah, blah, blah. And then I think, no, I'm not going to wear vintage because I would like that vintage dress to be kept, preserved, etc., etc. So no, because what if I vomit, void myself? And do I really want to do it this week? Because my gosh, there's this really great thing happening next week that I really want to see or photograph or show or whatever. So the side of me that is me, and I'm not schizophrenic or bipolar, all that shit, I don't hear voices, I just hear me, convincing myself that I have too much to offer. And this is the other thing, do not ever tell a suicidal person that they have a lot to live for. They know! They just want to be shown that they're worth something. In that podcast episode, I share a little of what it took to convince me that actually, wait a moment, I do really want to live. What unfortunately happens is the brain gets used to an ideation. That's why it's called an ideation. And regardless of how strong, capable, functioning, and accomplished you are, when that ideation takes a hold, it says, hello, you thought I'd gone, eh? And now I'm back. And you're battling with yourself to save yourself. And however, I do know that I am healed from the power of that ideation. What I do now have are the remnants of that causing PTSD in me. So unfortunately, in the healing process, right, the naked mind especially, I don't take any form of medication whatsoever. Because as full-time creators and launching all our platforms to showcase our skills and to then use these platforms to showcase everybody else's skills and other people, etc. It is fairly difficult for us because you don't have regular income coming in other than the work that we get. And thanks AI, but for writers and photographers and content creators and graphic designers, well, we're becoming obsolete. Having said that, photography was supposed to make painters obsolete, and it just made painters more valuable, really. But artists are always asked to show blood and their entrails before they get rewarded. And it doesn't matter what you do. They still want more, still want you to prove worthy of being rewarded for your artistry. And despite having a 35-year body of work around me, my transparency and the fact that I'm very open about these things and I talk quite bluntly about the atrocities and trauma the world is enduring, and that nothing is going to change unless individuals change. Nothing in this world is going to change. You can advocate all you want. You can go and be the activist who's constantly at the front of the marches. You're doing so much rushing around the place. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to speak here, you're going to do that, da 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 da. Mate, no. You're just running away from yourself. Sit the fuck down and look at yourself. I had to really confront myself. Holy shit, it's not easy. And the worst part of healing is confronting yourself and the parts you play and have played. And I say parts because, the trauma builds up from various ways. And we all have a choice. Yeah, we do. But this is how I also know that when something has set in your brain, it is very difficult to shake it out And so, as I'm saying, um, at times, because, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and PTSD. Great. Which, it was fairly difficult to acknowledge that. It's like, what do you mean, anxiety? So, what? I don't think so. As I have explained before, I've had anxiety attacks. That's why I do know how they feel. And one happened about a week after my mother died, and I had to go to the hospital to see my ex-partner who had to go into hospital for a checkup. And I had said to him, look, I can't go to the hospital. And he made me feel guilty for leaving him alone in there. God, you're a grown man. Older than me. But anyway, I had to go to the hospital. I remember where I was wearing red. It was a blue sky. The hospital has all reflectors, like windows, and I could see myself wearing all red against a blue sky, and I just remember my chest started caving in on itself, and I fell to my knees in front of a hospital, and no one came to my aid. I had to take my jumper off. It wasn't the middle of winter. It was August. And I had to pick myself up and walk into the hospital where my mother had died a week ago. But I do know what it feels like to have an anxiety attack. I've had them before. I've had them throughout my life, strong enough, not a lot, but like say 5, 6 times strong enough for me to go, what the fuck is that? Oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, because that's what it feels like. So I have had cardiovascular tests, and the doctors have said to me, Sandhya, there's nothing wrong with you. You're really healthy, but I do think you have an anxiety. And how dare you wash your mouth out, was my attitude. There's something wrong with me. This is how crazy we are. We would rather something be wrong with us physically than acknowledge that something is wrong with us mentally. Because the stigma of being mentally unwell, right, makes it sound like we're all fucking crazy. No, it's everybody else that has driven us crazy. Everybody else's craziness has created the trauma that we carry. Anyway. Healing. Wow, healing has to be done completely and properly. It has to be done in a cocoon of safety. I am healing. I'm healing rapidly, and I recognize now that when people say they've been triggered by something, that actually shows me that they're not healed at all. They're not, and people like to blame other people. I've done it. I've blamed my husband. You've triggered me, and that's an easy way out. That is coward's way out. I have had to then acknowledge, it's me. I haven't healed. And having said that, there's a lot of gaslighters out there who will trigger you, but the stronger you are in yourself, the more healed you are, the less you will be triggered. There will be people who will want to trigger you everywhere you go. I seem to trigger a weakness in people where I guess people may call that polarizing. I'm not polarizing, because I know the people who like me, and they too are people we are people of a caliber. We are strong people. Strong people like strong people. So I do know. I don't polarize those people. I polarize weak people who are hiding in, strong vessels, activist vessels, or whatever it is that they're doing. Or, I don't know. Weak people get triggered. Even the good people who are weak get triggered. So, one of the least traumatized people I know, if not the only, is Dwayne. And not because he hasn't experienced things that have caused to create trauma within him, but because he chose to delete those parts of him. And I have said that may not necessarily have been the right thing too, but he chose the right things. He chose to not have emotions, but he can still feel. And he chose to then delete only that which did not serve its purpose or hurt him and hurt others. And this is the shadow work that we all have to do on ourselves as we grow. He started doing that. He started growing into the man he is in his 20s. I started growing into the woman I am. Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe just 2 years ago when I broke apart and gave birth to myself. That's how it feels. What is it they say of this Christian thing? Born again? Well, I get it. I get it. In a deluge of tears, the bones of my brain just tore apart. I gave birth to myself, and I am still growing. I am a newborn 53-year-old. It feels amazing. I remember at the first start, when I was first healing, it just felt so amazing to look at the world like I have always known you are beautiful. That is what has kept me hopeful and full of joy. But I could actually feel stillness within me, within my brain. It feels so nice to just sit and have nothing in my brain. Nothing that I'm running from. Nothing that I have to run to. Nothing that is worrying me. Unfortunately, this year there has been a bit of a regression because of the leaps of faith we made into ourselves, and me encouraging, because Dwayne was working not just as a graphic designer for publishing houses, etc., but also taking any job he could just so that we wouldn't be worried about financials, so we have a free flow of that, so I can heal, because I was in no state. And for those of you who have been on my Instagram account, and boy, have I lost a lot of people and friends, but then there you go, right? I have been healing visibly. I have been healing as visibly as I hid my trauma. So I chose to take off this cloak of invisibility that was my public persona. I chose to take it off in public. Transparency is liberating. It is so liberating to start from a platform where you have nothing to hide. You think you've got something on me? Come at me. I've either got an answer or I'm going to laugh in your face for the lies you have believed, the delusions you are under, and so many people are delusional. So many, regardless of how good they are. So many people deny the truth to themselves by... Anyway, I don't mean to be judgmental. Fuck it, I'm not giving you advice, so... I'm not giving anyone advice here. I'm just sharing what it feels like from one person's point of view, because I don't have time to be miserable. I'm sick and tired of this misery that decides it's going to take over my mind. And yet I am healed enough to say, hey, wait a moment. And look, I might as well tell you everything, right? A few months ago, yes, there was reason for me to actually get badly triggered and regress. And I did regress very badly. But I also bounced back, came back into myself faster than I thought I would, or have ever, without masking, without denial. I actually just, I guess that's what they call emotional regulation, by understanding what is happening to me. And also because, yes, okay, I was suicidal, but I was also sitting there talking to myself, and because I recognized that the suicidal part of me is the 6-year-old girl who had to swallow that scream because my mother asked me to. So I can then talk to that 6-year-old me and say, hey, babe, hey, my little girl, it's me, our 53-year-old self. Can I talk to you, my 6-year-old self? Can I just show you that everything you endeavored to be, well, you are that. Sorry, let me get a handle on myself. I don't know how to turn the screen off on YouTube. It's really nice to be able to talk to yourself. Anyway, So that's how I know how healing really works. Healing really, really works, but you have got to do it with transparency. You can't lie to yourself. You can't resort to oblivion via medication or alcohol or just absolute denial. You cannot. You want to heal. You have got to heal yourself nakedly. That's not advice. I don't know. Maybe that's just words. I know. That's just what I know. And being able to talk to my 6-year-old self and reassure her that it's okay. We are not 6 anymore. We are not 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, to 17, 18, to 53. Actually, 51. It's nice. Because when that ideation takes hold, it's not actually the 53-year-old, very capable, very competent, very strong me. It is that 6-year-old girl who is also very strong. But oh my gosh, she had to stay strong for her mother because she knew her mother was staying strong for her. Yeah, it's nice to know that healing does work. Because you get stunted. And that's what PTSD is. You get stunted at the age where your trauma does the most damage. And our memories are such as that they need to do the whole round, orbit our brain so that we can healthfully reach back into our memories for everything. But when we're stunted by trauma, there's so much that we repress that there are gaps in things, and naturally, but they're not gaps in our brain, they're just gaps in our ability to bring that memory forth. But our cells feel it. Our cells are also filled with the memory of us. And so this is why we experience PTSD. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not talking about medical ways or the scientific reasons we experience all of this. But anyway, I will continue talking about this, I guess. I didn't really particularly want to talk about it here. The Sandhya Show is not just about mental health and all of that. I actually wanted to talk about mental health because I was talking about it on this morning's The Daily Egg as to what is going on in the world. What is going on with the world's males? Why? And you know who has the power to stop all of that and stop giving birth? Then maybe, I don't say we have the power. Women have no power. We have the power. We have the power. But then it becomes into a battle of genders, and that's not what it's meant to be either. It's just that we've given birth through the generations to such trauma, millennia worth of it, that it is going to be very, very difficult to say, okay, we can, this will solve everything if we do this, stop a war here. No, people are traumatized. And it's ingrained in people. And the only way to change it is that each and every single person on this planet looks to themselves and says, you must change first. I'm going to paraphrase that often misquoted words from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Be the change you want to see. He didn't actually say that. These are words in amongst a longer quote. But there you go, you should. And in the mirror, see the change you want to be. Do people actually look at their eyes when they look in the mirror? Or do they just look at their masks? Of course, we've got more and more masks at our disposal. We've got cosmetics, we've got filters, we've got fillers. You can continue to hide whoever you are. I did want to talk about cosmetic surgery, actually, and cosmetic enhancements. So I'll talk about that next week. Why are we doing this? Why the trauma? Why is aging, which is inevitable? Because just because you stop yourself looking old, and I'm sorry, any woman older, when you're in your 50s, it makes it really obvious you are battling getting older by all the crap you've done to your face. Anyway, Look, I'm going to go for now because this is a 1.5 hour show, so I'm coming up to my time. Thank you very much for being here. If you have been here and if you've watched this far, and if you watch it later, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Hey, I am a radio and television person after all, but I am also transparent, and I am sharing my healing process. I will share more, but next week on the Sandhya Show, we're going to talk about the cosmetic world that we live in. It's all for show. Thanks for being here. See you next time.